Hello and welcome to Next 2.0 on WQLN PBS NPR. The show is produced by the Public's Voice Media. I'm your host, Marcus Atkinson. If you want to know more about Next 2.0, you can go to Facebook and like the page. You can follow us on Instagram at Next 2.0 Erie. There you can keep up with upcoming show promos, events, and clips about what's next for our communities and our democracy. Thank you so much for tuning in. I have one of our esteemed guests with me today, a young man by the name of Brandon Wiley. Brandon, welcome to the show.
What's going on? How you doing? Thank you for having me.
I'm doing well. Usually when you guys hear Brandon's voice, we talk about open eyes. We're going to take a little turn today and talk about something different. So Brandon, I want to read you this woman's resume and we'll go forward with the conversation from there and see what your thoughts are. I want to talk to you about a lady by the name of Bebe Moore Campbell. She was born in February 18th, 1950 to November 27, 2016. She was an American author, journalist, and teacher. She was the author of 3 New York Times bestsellers, Brothers and Sisters, Singing in Comeback Choir, and What You Owe Me, which was also on the LA Times Best Book of 2001. Her other works include the novel Your Blues Ain't Like Mine, and that was about Emmett Till and his death and how that affected the African-American community. That was a groundbreaking book. That was a New York Times notable when she won the NAACP Image Award. As well, her memoir, Sweet Summer, Growing Up With and Without My Dad, and her first nonfiction book, Successful Women, Angry Men, Backlash in the Two-Career Marriage. Her essays, articles, and excerpts appear in many anthologies. But here's what's so noteworthy about her in terms of our conversation today. Campbell's works of fiction would often relay the harmful impact that racism would inflict on individuals and their relationships. Her interest in mental health was the catalyst for her first children's book, Sometimes Mommy Gets Angry, which was published in September of 2003. This book won the National Alliance on Mental Health Outstanding Literature Award for 2003. And the book tells a story of how a little girl copes with being reared by her mentally ill mother. Obviously, this is an African-American woman. Ms. Campbell was a member of the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill and a founding member of NAMI Inglewood. Her book, 72-Hour Hold, also dealt with mental health illness, and her first play, Even with Madness, debuted in New York City in June 2003. This work revisited the theme of mental health and mental illness in the family. And so at the end of the day, in May 2008, the U.S. House of Representatives announced July, that being this month, as Bebe Moore Campbell National Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. How about that?
Powerful. Powerful. Wow.
And so, you know, when you look at the work of Ms. Campbell, and I want to talk to you about your BIPOC coalition that you're a part of, how it was started and all of that good stuff. Talk about your feeling as I read the resume of this woman and how this month came to be named after her. And then talk about how the organization that you're involved with now became what it is, the mission, and where you're going with this.
Yeah, first of all, that's a wonderful resume. Very interesting. And I think too, in thinking and looking at that and thinking about that, it's really a testament to going through things, right? Going through things and being like, you know what, out of this bad thing, something good is going to come out of it. Right. You know what I'm saying? And there's an awareness that needs to come out of it too. And something as important as Minority Mental Health Awareness Month, I think we need to take a look at that from a lens. People always talk about, well, isn't all mental health matters for everybody? Well, yeah. Mental health is a generalist type of issue. Mental illness is a general type of issue, but it impacts cultures and different groups differently.
It sure does.
And I always encourage to say, hey, let's take a look at all different types of cultures and form different groups to assist and to bring more awareness to that. And that's what we did with the BIPOC Coalition, Black and Brown Communities on Mental Health and Wellness. And really where that stemmed from was years of me working in the healthcare field and really seeing the disparities that our Black and Brown individuals tend to go through and the stigmas and the barriers with treatment, the misdiagnoses of Black and Brown people.
It's a big one.
It's a big one. And a lot of people don't know this. Like, we are misdiagnosed with schizophrenia more than any other race or ethnicity. And think about that on this level. we're diagnosed with that, and we're medicated for something that we don't have. A psychotropic as powerful as some of those meds for schizophrenia are being taken and consumed for individuals who don't have it, and that's happening at an alarming rate. So when we took a look at this from that lens of healthcare, and again all the disparities that we tend to see, we said we have to bring an awareness to this, not only to our community, because obviously there's a lot of fear in being vulnerable, just on a general scale, but then there's a distrust within our community with healthcare providers, and for good reason. For good reason. So how do we bring awareness to find the proper resources, and also how do we educate our healthcare providers to understand that things are different for certain individuals? And there's a lot of again disparities and misdiagnoses and just overall systemic issues that are associated with healthcare for certain folks, in particular Black and brown folk. And so when we take a look at that, this coalition was formed for a number of different reasons, and that's again to educate healthcare providers and educate our community too, so we can break these stigmas of mental health in general.
And I love that because obviously there's a need for it. Now I know that here at the Public's Voice and Next 2.0, we wanted to lend our voices to this very same discussion because, we've interfaced a lot with this coalition, and we recognize that this is a needed and necessary, not just month, but disseminating the information about mental health. This needs to be a lifestyle that we all engage in on a regular basis, because we know the stigmas of, mental health awareness when it comes to our particular community. We brought in two-time NBA champ Vernon Maxwell. And we brought Vernon in a couple of weeks ago, and we recorded an episode with Dr. Melanie Hetzel-Riggin, and I know that she's been involved, and she's involved with this coalition as well. And myself and Dr. Melanie sat down with Vernon, and we unpacked his story. If you don't know Vernon as a listener, outside of winning 2 NBA championships with the Houston Rockets, outside of being the guy that was always stuck with the task of guarding Michael Jordan, right, and would give it to Mike as much as he took from Mike. I encourage you to go watch the videos. Vernon was a monster, but they called him Mad Max. And his nickname came from his three-point shooting prowess, but he became known for what they saw as his NBA madness. He got kicked out of a lot of games. He had stormed the audience to go after, people that in the crowd. And he would have repeated outbursts on the court, in the locker room, became known for. Kicked out of this game, fighting with this person, fighting in the locker room with that person, incidents off field. And what he recognized at some point, I have mental health issues and I have struggles around this. And he would talk to people and they would say, oh man, hey, Black folk don't do that, man. You talk to somebody, man. Y'all, you got a pastor or something? Don't go to counseling. That word start getting out, and so he would just suppress it and try to deal with it on his own. And now he has his own nonprofit, the Vernon Maxwell Initiative, and this is what he does, especially the young athletes. Like, nah, man, we need to discuss this.
Absolutely.
So that will debut here soon. But I wanted to talk about this Mental Health Awareness Month and what it means to your organization and what some of your plans are surrounding that month.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, this is obviously a prime opportunity. Our organization and coalition is centered around bringing awareness just in general. Like you had just mentioned, like not just this month, but every month, every day. We want to bring more and more awareness to this issue. Obviously, this month is especially important. And the goal is to find avenues and ways that we can, again, talk about Black and brown mental health. We could talk about the stigmas that we're associating with by hosting events, collaborating with a lot of other individuals such as yourself and other groups that are a part of the community to again, this is how we educate ourselves. I always say this, I don't always anticipate everybody to know everything about everything.
Exactly.
So that the anticipation and the purpose and the mission of this coalition is to be a resource and a guide to not only provide resources, but to go and meet people where they're at.
Yeah.
Because the assumption is that, there's all these resources out there, everybody should know. And we all know about the word should, and we all know about what assuming does.
Yeah.
It doesn't get us anywhere. Like we have to understand that. Yep. Like we have to be a little bit more aggressive. And I say that in the most healthy, appropriate way in getting these messages out. And that's the purpose of this coalition, and that's the purpose of this month, is to provide a method, a proactive communication of what this month is about, why it's a problem, and why we're doing what we need to do to bring this awareness.
This is one of the points that I made to Vernon when we talked in the interview, and I'll unpack that again with you, because having been involved with youth development some 33 years, at my first job in youth development at 19 actually, and it's some of the work that I'm known for in Erie. And I juxtapose that to my own childhood, and I think about some of the young people that I went to school with, young men in particular, who just couldn't regulate their emotions.
Sure.
Right? And it's almost hard to know the difference. And so hindsight is 2020. I look back at the young people that I grew up with, and I think about all the ones who just acted out and felt like they could not help themselves. They couldn't do anything other than act out, right? And then I think about the kids that I've worked with over these 30 plus years that are in the same category, and I've watched them go two different directions. The majority of them, I would trace their lack of self-regulation to maybe environmental, anger issues, I don't know. There are a handful that I grew up with, that I've worked with, that as they've gotten older into the adult world, I see, oh, they got mental health issues, and you would see it manifest itself like full blown as the years go on. Here's the problem, Brandon. In the African-American community, self-regulation, especially amongst our children, I'm speaking for Erie, self-regulation is at an all-time low, it feels like. Respect is at an all-time low, it feels like. And there's so much acting out, it's like, damn, who just doesn't know how to act?
Right.
And who's got mental health issues?
Right.
But all that to say, when I see the extreme examples of that, the shootings, the not being able to maintain any level of consistency in life, from school to home to the law, I gotta feel like there's something going on mentally.
Sure.
Talk about how mental health, well, definitely intersects, but how it intersects and potentially intersects with the African-American community, and what things we're just overlooking when we should be saying, maybe there's something deeper going on with that.
Absolutely. No, all great points. And you hit a term called emotional regulation. That I've been preaching that for a while. And I hate to be this guy to say this, but with the increase of what you see on social media, and with there's a lot of wild stuff on social media that are exposing our children's developing brain at a very young age, almost images that are very traumatic to see, that our children are becoming desensitized to. It's nothing to go on Twitter and then the algorithm, for whatever reason, shows a crazy video of somebody getting hurt or something happened or something catastrophic happening. Now, that's not just within the African-American community. That's just kind of like a generalization. But you think about us specifically in the African-American community, and one of the issues that we have in our community is violence. We're exposed to violence. What does that constitute to? What constitutes the trauma.
There you go.
And what does trauma do for a developing brain? If we're going specifically with you, not only what does it do for an adult, but what does it do for a developing brain?
There you go.
So there is a lot of things, and there's another word that I want to throw out here, and I say this with the utmost respect. We have to be a more resilient society. We have to preach resilience. And going back to the emotional regulation thing here, you see people, they cannot handle rejection.
Oh my God.
They can't handle being told no. They can't handle any form of criticism, whether it's constructively or maliciously.
You ain't lying.
And here's the part about life. We're going to receive criticisms constructively and maliciously.
There you go.
We have to be able to know what to do with it. And we can't just act out or impulsively act out. Now, again, if there's no proper emotional regulation being conveyed, then we're going to continuously have this vicious cycle of individuals, especially in our African-American community, and our African-American youth are going to completely be exposed to these ongoing cycles.
It's, you said a mouthful there. You said a mouthful there. Listen, I don't talk about this very publicly, and I won't say this knucklehead's name because I'm not giving him any publicity. I remember when I was being cyber stalked and just maligned publicly by a certain individual. And it was just extra over the top. I had all of my family and friends calling me, running up on me like, dude,
Yeah.
What's wrong with this person? I had to put my lawyer on this person and neutralize them legally. And even then, it was an issue to get him to just shut the hell up. Here's my point, though, to your point. Man, I don't see how you do it. Brother, you think I'm coming out of character and jeopardizing everything that I have been used to build community-wide?
Right.
Everything that I have built personally and professionally for me and my family, you think I'm gonna jeopardize that because I can't regulate my emotions on this matter? You got another thing coming.
I know that's right.
Right? And to not be able to say, let me count the consequences before I do X, Y, and Z.
Yes.
Let me think about what this is gonna play out like if I say X, Y, because you can't unsay it. You can't undo it. My father, and I'll throw it back to you here, my father used to say something when I was young, and it was so true. He said, son, there's a reason why in the courtroom the attorney will say something that he knows good and well the judge is going to strike from the records, and he knows somebody's going to object, but he knows you can't unring that bell. Once the jury hears it, they heard it.
Sure thing.
And you can hold your hands up, my bad, judge, take it off the records. It's still in one of y'all minds.
Yep.
Right? So these actions, these words, you can't unring that bell.
No.
Right? And you can ruin perfect opportunities.
Absolutely.
Because you can't regulate, which goes back to the progress of community. And so to the coalition.
Yes.
The outreach goals in these Black and brown communities, give us some of those. And if you're noticing some key differences in how this plays out in the African-American community, New American community, and when I say New American, I know that term alone is diverse, the Latina community. What's some of the feedback that you're getting from these different ethnicities on this subject? Yeah.
And to go back, about a year ago or so, we had hosted a resiliency event, and showed a video surrounding trauma. And I remember specifically after that event, people coming up to me and other members of the coalition, because we processed it all together, and people were coming up and saying, man, I never thought about, it took me back to this experience. And it made me think about why as an adult now, why I've been doing the things that I've been doing, and what I've been harboring, and what I've been concealing, and how that's impacted my relationships, how that's impacted my job. People really harbor those things, but trauma is trauma. And I think the thing that people, it's a scary thing too. Let me highlight that. It's a scary thing to have to try to confront trauma or any type of trial or tribulation that's going on in your life. It's hard to be vulnerable in that aspect and to admit that. And I think where I see the value in the coalition, not where I know the value of the coalition lies, is in this exposure. We're gonna talk about it and bring awareness to your mental and make you think. But the other part of it is, and this is the most important part, is what to do with it when we bring it to the surface, and where to go to be able to process that, who to go to, what are your support systems, how can we bring more trust within the dynamic of mental health and mental wellness, because mental health and mental illness are two different things. I mean, they're on the same, mental health is again, of course, like your mental pulse, with the things that are going on with you. Illness is the things that, trauma, anxiety, depression, PTSD, all of these things. So we want to promote better mental health and wellness. And we need to help people just develop better coping skills.
There you go.
Coping skills is one of, and here's the thing, there are negative coping skills.
Yeah, very much
and
so.
People, and that's the other issue to it. People, and going back to emotional regulation, people don't know how to handle their emotions. So they resort to things that temporarily harbor and numb the pain. That's why you have drinking. That's why people resort to drugs. Yeah. That's why people resort to whatever. We need to have a conversation about healthy coping skills. Yeah. And that's where this coalition is going to serve best.
I can dig it. Listen, when you talk about New Americans, some of our New American brothers and sisters come from war-torn regions.
Yes.
Comes with its own form of trauma, right? You look at some of our rural brothers and sisters, and politically, there have been some come to Jesus moments politically, because I think we have promoted a a trauma competition amongst the ethnicities and amongst groups, right? And we always say, and listen, black folks, if you're listening, and I know some of you are, it is that we always say it is not a competition.
Right.
We have a unique kind of trauma, like Sister Moore said in her book, you know, your blues don't look like my blues. She's right. And their blues don't look like our blues. It's not a competition. You know, you've got some parts of the county where there is high levels, exorbitantly high, disproportionately high levels of drug use, alcoholism, teenage pregnancy, all of these traumas and acts that are manifested from trauma that happen in these areas. And so it's important that we recognize that different groups bring different stuff.
Yes.
And it's not a competition. It's not well, my stuff on the Richter scale registers higher than yours. Is that? But how it affects them may hit, it all hits different.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
It all hits different. But I want to read something from Mental Health America has unleashed this toolkit, and I'm going to post it, you know, link to it on this show. And you can see it on our page as well. We'll post some different things from this toolkit. It can be downloaded for free.
Yep.
Mental Health America's 2024 BIPOC Mental Health Toolkit. And in this toolkit, it breaks down 18 myths, or not 18 myths, it's on page 18, but it breaks down these different myths. And how many do they have here? I want to say there are 6 different myths that you hear, and I want to talk about each one briefly and get your reaction to it.
Yes, sir.
Myth number 1, talking about my feelings and needing help is a sign of weakness. Your thoughts?
That's always the big one. Again, going back to that vulnerability. If I talk about it, it's going to be problematic. If I talk about it, I'm going to be exposed. If I talk about my issues, then there's something wrong with me. You know, coming to grips with, look, we all got stuff going on. And I think the most false statement is everybody's okay. Everybody got stuff going on to a degree. And like you were saying, the craziest thing is I'm not going to compare my struggle to everybody else's struggle. Like, struggle is struggle. It means something to everybody. It's what we do with it at the end.
That's right.
Talking about it is of utmost importance because you think about it, you look at a cup, and if you have a pitcher of water and you pour into that cup and you just keep pouring and pouring, what eventually happens?
Exactly.
It overflows. That happens with emotion.
Yeah.
If we're not keeping and emotions are a part of our human construct. We have emotions. There's nothing wrong with it. And there's nothing wrong with being sad. There's nothing wrong with feeling angry at times. There's nothing wrong with those things. It's more about what we're doing with those things when they present itself. So talking about it that's a complete and utter. That's another stigma. We got to get past that.
And you know what? Let's add this side note to it.
Yeah.
How often we are reinforcing this very toxic myth to our boys.
That's
right.
Yes. 100%.
Suck it up. Right. I don't want to hear how you feel. Take it like a man.
Yep.
We teach our boys that, oh man, talking about my feelings and needing help is a sign of weakness. I'm a boy. I need to just power through.
Yep.
And so I want to say to the listeners, stop doing that if you're perpetuating that cycle, and especially for our men. I know that our own macho and our own machismo makes us do this to our boys. And just like, is it because somebody gave you that toxic, that toxic way of dealing with it? It's not a good thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I want to say something to that. My version of masculinity is composure.
I love that.
A composed man is a real man.
I like that.
And I've always said composure is a skill set. And if you're a composed individual, and that goes for anybody, composed woman, I mean, but on the topic of our boys and our young boys, we talk about composure.
That's right.
When you're able to balance and, again, regulate, you are a powerful, dangerous individual on every good part imaginable. When you compose yourself and you don't let things disrupt your flow, you are a powerful being.
I like that. Myth number 2, and this is a touchy one because this touches on a lot of not just the social cultures, but the family cultures. Myth number 2, what happens in the family should stay in the family. Even when there's a family member that touches a child inappropriately, let's just deal with it as a family. When there's abuse within, let's just deal with it as that is a touchy myth. What do you say about that one?
I mean, and you know what? It's so much more prevalent than I think people realize. And what happens? It comes up it comes up down the road in some way, shape, or form, or it impacts individuals in some way, shape, or form. I can't tell you how many times I've worked with people over the years who have mentioned some type of form of family trauma that resulted in some type of sexual abuse, some type of physical, emotional abuse from family members. And it was just like, hey, we're not going to talk about it. And again, I will probably be referring back to this analogy the whole time we're talking about this, is what happens when you pour into a cup and you keep on pouring. It's going to overflow. And at some point, it's going to disrupt your future, and it's going to disrupt you. And it probably has disrupted you throughout your whole life. But you're just like trying to conceal it for so long that you don't want to think of it because it's a trauma, right? It's a trauma. But I think self-explanatory, these things that specifically, we can't, things like that, we cannot just keep it within the family and try to just act like it never happened. That's real, and it needs to be discussed.
And that goes back to having all of these, us being a melting pot as a nation, as a state, and as a city and community. You got all these different people. I remember when I was doing work within one of the schools in the Erie School District, and I had the principal mention to all of us as staffers and support staff about a certain ethnicity, because you had a parent complain he and his wife came in to talk to the teacher about said child. The teacher was directing some of her comments to mom. He took offense. You talking to me.
Wow.
I'm the head of this household. And love it or hate it, even the roles of wives and mothers and daughters, some of the things that are permissible in some of these societies follow, rightfully so. I mean, our cultures follow people to this melting pot we call the U.S. And some of these, for some people, it turns the entire family against them.
Sure does.
To say, I'm going to step out and trust somebody with this information. Is that something that as a professional you have seen or interfaced with?
Oh yeah, 100%. And I think that kind of goes back to what you're saying is, if we tell anybody outside of the family, then we're breaking family values. And they incorporate that or you know what I mean, like that type of thing. We see that on a regular basis. It's amazing the things that and again, when you think about the family dynamic and the family structure, and again you take a look at the vicious cycles that can be within some of these dynamics, it's like, man, and you didn't want to talk about this. You did not want to. You were told as a child, do not talk about this. So as a child, in your mind, you think about it from that perspective. I always say this in a lot of my workshops. I said, think about how you were raised. What did your guardians, whoever they were, how did they tell you to interact with other people? What did they tell you to keep within the family? What did they tell you to not talk to other people about? Who do they tell you to, all of those things? It's a deep reflection, and people. And every time I say that, people go, I can see their wheels turning in their head, like, wow, those are learned behaviors, as I call them. These are learned behaviors that continue to manifest. And then you think about it, you get older with those same belief systems, and what do? You pass it on to the next.
Yes, you do.
And that's that vicious cycle I'm talking about. And it continues to go. And another term we're talking about is that generational trauma, cultural trauma that's passed along. One of the biggest things that I learned as a father, going back to my son, I had a hard time growing up. I was bullied. I had a lot of mental health issues. One thing, him coming into himself as a young boy, I remember when he was first going to school, I was having nightmares. I was having nightmares about him being bullied to the point where I started to put my anxieties and my traumas onto him. How unfair is that for him? Because he's not experiencing that. And even if he does, my role as the father is to, obviously I can't hold his hand every second of the day, but my role is obviously to protect him always, but also teaching him how to protect himself. And knowing what to do, and knowing the resources that he does have, who he can go to, what he needs, how he needs to communicate feelings. And that goes back to what we were saying, communication of feeling, acknowledgement of feeling is important, but also we got to teach ourselves what to do with those feelings. And that breaks up a lot of those gray areas for us within these dynamics in regards to mental health and wellness. Like, we got to get past all this stuff of, if something bad happens, we got to keep it within. We can't say it. We can't talk about it out. It's going to destroy us. No, it's already destroying you.
There's the point.
It's already destroying you, but you're being destroyed currently by this thing. And now, again, the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
Yep.
We got to break that.
Yes, we do. And that's an excellent analogy with your son and his experience and everything else. You appreciate that. Myth number 3 and 4 are actually linked together, because myth number 3 is therapy is for crazy people. Myth number 4, therapy is for white folks.
Yeah.
And listen. Once upon a time, I would laugh repeating this one, because I felt like that. You grow up, and it was something that, at the family events and the family cookouts, somebody would say that as a joke, and everybody would laugh, because we did view that as white people stuff. But, and I try to plug this in there every chance I get before I let you react to that. I 100% get how that, in our culture anyways, came to be. I have listened to the narratives from my grandfather, from my great-grandfather, from my uncles, from my great-uncles, right? And in these narratives, to hear of the humiliation and the disrespect and the frustrations that they were forced to deal with by law even. And they had to power through.
Sure.
They had to suppress. And they would say, listen, if I spent my days acting out on what I saw and what I heard that felt disrespectful, that felt emasculating, all dehumanizing, I would have never been able to function as an adult.
Sure thing.
And so how do you get through it? You deal with it. So suppressing was a defense mechanism for black folks.
Yes.
For good reason. For generations.
Yes.
So let's just ignore, I can't speak for other groups, but for black folk, I completely get how and why.
No doubt.
We said, nah, that ain't it.
No doubt.
But for now, for today, knowing what we know, these two myths are also destructive. For crazy people, it's for white people. Speak to those.
Absolutely. No, you brought up a lot of great points, and it's hard to and we hate to say that it's hard to argue with that, because again, different times, like you were almost, like you said, forced to suppress and just keep moving forward, because you didn't even have those resources presented to you at that time in certain time periods. So that's the other part to this too, right? Is and what I believe the coalition specifically, and what we're doing in these times, we have to look at, again, the history, what history has taught us, what it has presented, and why people are the way that they are, and for good reason. It was the time period. It was, of course, passed on, and that's that generational trauma and all I talk about. But we now have to begin to rewire our way of thinking a little bit. There was a time for that, and now there's a time for this.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? And that's how I view points in time. Back then, we couldn't have been talking about this like that. But it wasn't realistic. And that's just what it is. And that's unfortunate, but that's just what it is. That was the time.
And you get that rewiring is a community-wide and society-wide thing in the United States of America.
Yes.
In his living years, Congressman John Lewis said something that I thought was profound then, that I think is even more profound now. He said nonviolence resistance showed empathy to the perpetrator. Now, nobody wants to hear that part.
For sure.
But it showed empathy to the perpetrator. Well, why? So now I'm hearing this from Congressman John Lewis from his own lips in Atlanta. He said, because we recognize that even our white brothers and sisters were tainted and traumatized from years of the United States history in slavery. It was as traumatizing on that side as it was on this. It may look different, and here's an example of that. You have slave masters would go and whip the black buck for his insurrection, and they would mandate that everybody on the plantation, especially the women and children, boys, get front row seats. Because I want to inflict this trauma.
Absolutely.
And set an example.
Yep.
Right? Then you see the photos of these lynching parties.
Yep.
And you got black folk hanging from the tree, the strange fruit, right? That was talked about by our sister Nina Simone. Black folk hanging from the tree, but dig the photo. You got mainstream white folk and their children smiling for the camera as these black bodies hung behind them. You mean to tell me some of those kids and some of those people aren't traumatized by that? You mean to tell me they didn't hand that trauma? Listen, especially the kids, they being dragged there by adults who generationally are being taught this is it. This is the right thing.
Absolutely.
And you can't tell me some of them didn't look on like, yeah, this is what we do. Like, damn, this is this is bothering me.
For sure.
And dreamt about it.
Yep.
And wrung their hands about it and handed that. Come on,
Absolutely.
man. And so America, as Bernie Mac would say, America, we all have trauma from our worst years.
Yes, we do.
Don't sleep on it.
Yes, we do.
But that's myth number 3 and number 4. 5, ooh, this strikes to the heart of the black community. And I'm giving you the pastor's cadence because this comes up all the time.
Yes.
Myth number 5, if you're struggling, you aren't praying enough.
Oh. Oh boy.
In the black community, if you are struggling, you must not have a good relationship with God. If you need these folk to walk you through what's going, where's your faith? I say that in jest, but that is real. I can hear my grandmother and great grandmother say that right now. Brother, unpack that one.
I mean, let's talk about it foundationally. We all know that above anything else, we black and brown African American community, we're connected to the church.
We are spiritual folk.
We are spiritual folk. That's that. Before you do anything else, you go to your pastor.
That's it.
You go to your church. You go to your church family. And even that was, a little like, go to your pastor. That's the therapist. That's the all knowing. Look, I'm a spiritual person. I believe in my higher power. I believe in God.
Amen.
And I do believe that there are obviously the clear benefits of having that spirituality in a relationship with something greater than yourself. However, we got to be real. We can't anticipate. I like to look at it like this. Mm-hmm. Instead of trying to separate both, we need to figure out how we can intertwine them together.
There you go.
How we can, because spirituality can be a part of the healing mental health process. Mm-hmm. And in fact, we use that. That is a thing that, I'll speak for myself and a lot of other colleagues that I do know in their therapeutic techniques. Addressing spirituality and getting people to say, hey, are you a spiritual person? Do you want this incorporated in your treatment?
Yeah.
We could talk about that. And that's a powerful tool because spirituality is in fact used as a healthy coping skill. It could also be used negatively. Mm-hmm. So it's one of those things. Because if you're not in a healthy church dynamic, we know that people tend, there's toxicity. Yes, there are toxicity within the church dynamic.
Yep.
I don't want to, I gotta call a spade on some things. You gotta say what you gotta say. There is toxicity. I've experienced it on many different levels, and it's not just one religion, it's all religions. But there is toxicity. But I think that's the thing as mental health clinicians. And the other thing we're doing with the BIPOC Coalition is like, hey, we recognize that black and brown folk, African American community, gravitate towards the church.
Yeah.
So why aren't we hitting the church to say, hey, how can we collaborate more together to incorporate and intertwine spiritual and mental health related issues and topics? Why not go to the church? When we're talking about meeting people where they're at, we have to look at this situation and be like, hey, we know African American people, our community, we gravitate towards the church. So where are we going to find them at? We're going to find them at the church.
There you go.
So let's go to the pastors. Let's develop rapport and communication and healthy patterns so we can say, hey, let's incorporate all this together. Let's use this platform to say, hey, let me first explain to you what my purpose is here. Let me first explain to you why I think this is important. And then we can mix it up and we can work collaboratively and cohesively to bring this more, this awareness to the people. And I think that is, so yeah, I don't want to sit here and say that I'm bashing the church. I'm not at all. Spirituality is important. It's beneficial, but we have to be real. It's not to complete all of everything about our mind, body, and spirit. There's other avenues and other aspects that we, just like working out. You know what I'm saying? Like if you could go to church all day and you're like, oh, I'm unhealthy physically. Going to church every day may not help your physical. It might not help you get to your fitness goals that you need to get to. What do you got to do? You got to go to the gym. You got to eat differently. You got to do certain things.
Yeah.
Same thing with your mental health. Some things just you need a little extra something. Yeah. And that is that something. And that's why I said we need to work more cohesively between mental wellness and spirituality.
You hit the nail on the head. I think you made some excellent points. I know that I have seen the rise of partnerships between churches and mental health counselors.
Yes.
And counselors in general. There are some organizations that have offices within some of these churches. I can name a few of you right now. And I think there's a lot of value in that. And I think if the church partnered with the mental health community that deeply and that profoundly, that alone would break down stigmas and stereotypes.
Absolutely.
And let's go back to the biblical days, because there was a pattern in terms of inflicting trauma on the constituency that plays out even more dramatically today. You know, they would bring people to the Colosseum and they would have these gladiator fights. And, you know, trauma was entertainment.
Yep.
And I'm going to watch the lion in the den at this person who was a prisoner or whomever. This is your opportunity for freedom. Come and entertain, and we're going to inflict this either death or trauma on you.
For sure.
And other people are going to be traumatized and entertained at the same time. They can't see they're being traumatized from witnessing people being torn apart by animals and murdering each other, but it's trauma. Fast forward that to 2024, people. World star. You know, these kids, these fighting videos, watching somebody get beat down, popular. Watching people argue on these shows on Bravo, A&E, popular. Trauma. You know, there's one series, you know, you got neighbor wars and all of these homemade videos of neighbors getting into it with their neighbors, store wars of people coming into stores and acting a fool, sucker punching the cashier, getting into trauma is entertainment.
It is.
To where it becomes, you know, this roach-infected blanket that you put on for comfort, and then you're scratching all over come on, man.
Absolutely.
So nowadays, it's like you aren't praying enough. So where the church is concerned, we have a diet. Use the example of diet and exercise. And you're right. You're at the gym all the time. You're not losing weight. You're not getting cut up. Then you look at their diet like, oh, dude, you on carbs and sweets from morning, noon, and night.
Absolutely.
From 8 a.m. to like 10 p.m. I don't care. You can't outrun that diet.
No, you cannot.
You can't outrun this diet of trauma that we have.
Great point.
Right?
Great point.
So it's beyond that. The last myth goes into what I touched upon. I stole some of the thunder from this, but there is, you know, a point to it. Myth number 6 is, and this is the last myth, my ancestors and family had it worse, so I don't have a right to feel how I do. And that encapsulates some of the traditions and customs and belief systems that come with some of our new American brothers and sisters that have come with us as Black folk of the church and as children of a movement, right? What do you say to that? Family had it worse. I don't have a right to feel the way that I do.
Well, I mean, what I would say to that is that kind of goes back to what we were saying about generational trauma, right? And I believe there's direct and indirect forms of trauma, you know, that can be passed. Obviously, some things that happened to our ancestors during slavery or during the civil rights, maybe we didn't directly experience it, but we're indirectly experiencing it because of the trauma that they experienced. So it's hitting us in some way, shape, or form. And I think that's and again, that's a mixed bag of things. I'm just under the belief that, going back to what I was saying before, when I ask people to think about their experiences growing up or how they were raised, that's actually one of the things that I'm trying to really hit on. Like, what was put onto you? And I'll go back to using my son. What was I putting on to my child?
Yeah.
He didn't directly experience the trauma that I experienced, but I'm indirectly putting it on him. So that can cause other issues down the line for him. That can cause anxiety for him. And like, where did this come from? It could cause some, you know, they could cause so many different things. So that's what I'm saying. Like, family, when we're talking about family, and I'll speak for, you know, without too much self-disclosure, got stuff going on in my own family that's been generations upon generations. Has it impacted us? Has it impacted me in some way, shape, or form? Absolutely. It does. Everybody has it. And often people reflect and say, damn, that's really sad. And it is. It's like, wow, I wish I had a big family. What happened down the line that completely just kind of dismantled that? Or I wish my family dynamic was a little bit stronger. I wish this, I wish that. And it's just like that. So that is an indirect trauma. It's an indirect anxiety. It's an indirect feeling. It's real. You have to process it. I talk to people about that all the time. It's like, this is how I was raised. And that's because of my guardians, parents, grandparents. That's because of their trauma that they experienced that was put on to me. So it's relative across the board. And again, everybody's impacted differently. I'm just under the impression that, look, if there's something that's disrupting our mental, if there's something that's disrupting us and it's interfering with our daily life, it needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
And I don't care how direct or indirect it is,
Mm-hmm.
the human capacity, what we need to do in order to feel fulfilled in life, to be able to be human beings day in and day out.
That's right.
We have to understand, like, there are things that impact us. Now, I'm not saying to use that as a crutch for your whole rest of your life to, this, that, and other thing, because that's the other part of it too. And this is the more insensitive side of me, is that we can't let our anxieties and our traumas completely destroy us either. This is where resiliency comes in.
Yep.
We have to acknowledge it for what it
right.
is, and we have to figure out what we need to do about it. Because I can talk about things that happened 20 years ago that's in fact impacting me now. My relationships that are ruined because of what happened 20 years ago. Oh, it's just who I am. It's just how I'm going through life. No, we have to figure out ways to actually correct it.
Yeah.
So we have to rewire the ways of thinking. And in order to do that, we need to be honest about it.
Yep.
And we need to seek the proper help.
That's right. That when you look at some of these different sites, this mental health awareness organization that I'm reading for with this toolkit, what all of them say is, what can you do to honor a month like this? Well, one is having these discussions and conversations.
Absolutely.
Right? That's doing your own part to remove the stigma. I don't have access to your family and friends the way you do. So certainly in your sphere of influence, you can do that. To your conversation with your son. I had a discussion with my son. We had to have a conversation about inappropriate touch. And he kind of looked at me like, where is this coming from? Because he's around coaches a lot. He's spending the night at people's houses. And I said, well, son, this may seem like an odd conversation to you, because a lot of the times some of these circumstances that you're in, like coaching, you're around a lot of men.
Absolutely.
And I said, but this isn't a gay or homosexual conversation. I was inappropriately touched when I was a kid. It was at the hands of a male relative.
Yep.
And that male relative, even as he's gotten older, he does not live a homosexual lifestyle.
Right.
But it's somewhere in his history, my guess is this was inflicted on him.
Sure.
Right? Everybody has a different story. I said, you need to be conscious of that even when you're with your friends. You may have one of your friends try to introduce something.
Absolutely.
And you're like, that ain't it. That ain't it. And not because that kid is a sexual deviant. If you're 10 and you're trying to introduce something, you learned it somewhere.
100%.
And there's somebody in that family that needs to have discussion with somebody, of an official capacity. But, and my wife was glad I had the conversation with him. Point being, to you and your son, we got to have these discussions.
We do.
My situation didn't mean that I was gay. I had to have somebody help unpack that. And if I was, there's nothing wrong with that. Let me add that.
Right.
Let me add that. But the two aren't even related.
Exactly.
It's not related. It's why, you have gay people around. I don't want them around my child. Because he or she is gay does not mean they are after your child.
Exactly.
Pedophiles oftentimes, it's had nothing to do with their sexual preferences on adults. It's a whole different, but you have to unpack these stigmas in your homes in your spheres of influence.
Absolutely.
So this is what the month is.
Yes.
We want to bring attention to the month. I will say from a Next 2.0 from a public voice perspective, this episode that we have aired will air at the end of this month to close out the month, and it will be a joint collaboration with this BIPOC coalition that Brand is involved with. And you'll hear more about that as we work towards the debut of this episode. So you can hear Vernon Maxwell's story, let him tell it. We celebrate the brother for utilizing his platform.
Sure.
And it's something that I believe that he spoke to a lot of different young people, especially young athletes while they were here, that they need to hear it.
Yes.
They need to hear it and they need to understand it. Any parting shots for our audience as we close up this episode? Thank you.
Yes, of course.
For bringing us your wisdom from a personal and from a professional standpoint, unpacking the mission of this BIPOC coalition.
Yes.
Before I let you go, are you seeing a steady growth in this coalition in terms of its membership, in terms of its mission?
Of course. And anytime we have events or anytime we talk about this, we immediately get more individuals who are like, what's the next event? Or what ways can I be a part? So that there is showing a true testament of the conversation and the importance of the conversation. Yeah. And so we're going to continue to expand. We're going to continue to be more, like I said, we have a Facebook page, Black and Brown Communities on Mental Health and Wellness. Check us out on Facebook. And we're going to be doing, and again, membership is membership. This is an open group. We want to bring people in, and I don't care if you're black, white, green, purple. this conversation, we need to talk. This is part of our overall general community.
There you go.
This is an important thing. We can't move forward as a community if we're not hitting these issues.
Yeah.
And so, just because this target audience is for African American, Black and brown folks, does not mean that we're excluding anybody else out of that conversation. Everybody needs to be part of this conversation. And to go along with that, I always like to throw out the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number. If anybody is ever experiencing any thoughts of wanting to harm themselves or anybody else, the number that is newer is 988. All you have to do is dial that number, 988.
Okay.
And it used to be a 1-800 number, and it's still active, but this was just studies have shown that when you can reduce the amount of time that you get help when you're in a crisis, it can reduce the chances of you actually moving forward and actually harming yourself.
Yeah, i.e. 911, 611, 411, right? Same logic.
Same logic.
So
and you can text that number too, 988, and you can text it as well. And there's people 24/7 that are ready to go to help you out.
That's powerful.
Absolutely. And don't forget around our county crisis numbers. The Erie County crisis number, I don't know that off the top of my head, but you can certainly look that up. But just to put putting these resources out so people are aware is what's most important.
Well, I tell you another thing that we accomplished with this goal today. We put the stigma to rest that Brandon Wiley's only thing is opening your eyes. That is not true.
Absolutely not. Right.
He is holistically concerned about you, ladies and gentlemen.
For sure.
So not just opening your eyes, but check your mental when you open your eyes.
Absolutely.
My
appreciate
man,
you
Brandon.
having me on, brother.
Hey, listen,
Thank you.
man, I appreciate you coming on. That's it for our show today. You all can tune in next time where you can catch more discussion and analysis with local and national guests. I want you to remember that Next 2.0 streams on Fridays on all major podcast platforms and on the fourth Sunday of the month at 4 p.m. And you can catch that on WQLN PBS NPR's radio station, which is 91.3 FM. Also, if you want to leave a message or a comment or a suggestion for a show, you want to talk about what you heard on this show, you want to have your come to Jesus moment, you can call 814-240-8816. That's the Next hotline, 814-240-8816. We look forward to hearing from you. I'm Marcus Atkinson. Come and join us next time so that you can hear about what's next for our communities and our democracy. Peace.